So our chapter today is So What Did You Say? At the end of this, you're going to start writing an application letter for a job of spy. Alex opened his eyes. He was still alive. That was a nice surprise. He was lying on a bed in a large, comfortable room. The bed was modern, but the room was old, with beams running across the ceiling, a stone fireplace and narrow windows in ornate wooden frames. He had seen rooms like this in books when he was studying Shakespeare. He would have said the building was Elizabethan. It had to be somewhere in the country. There was no sound of traffic. Outside he could see trees. Someone had undressed him. His school uniform was gone. Instead, he was wearing loose-fitting pyjamas, silk from the feel of them. From the light outside, he would have guessed it was very early evening. He found his watch lying on the table beside the bed, and he reached out for it. The time was 12 o'clock. It had been 4:30 when he was shot with what must have been a drug dart. He had lost a whole night and half a day. There was a bathroom leading off the bedroom, bright white tiles and a huge shower behind a cylinder of glass and chrome. Alex stripped off the pyjamas and stood for 5 minutes under a jet of streaming water. He felt better after that. He went back into the bedroom and opened the cupboard. Someone had been to his house in Chelsea. All the clothes were here, neatly hung up. He wondered what Crawley had told Jack. Presumably, he would have made up some story to explain his sudden disappearance. He took out a pair of Gap combat trousers, a Nike sweatshirt and trainers, got dressed, then sat on the bed and waited. About 15 minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and it opened. A young Asian woman in a nurse's uniform came in beaming. "Oh, you're awake and dressed. How are you feeling? Not too groggy, I hope. Please come this way. Mr. Blunt is expecting you for lunch." Alex hadn't spoken a word to her. He followed her out of the room, along a corridor, and down a flight of stairs. The house was indeed Elizabethan. The wooden panels along the corridors, ornate chandeliers and oil paintings of old bearded men in tunics and ruffs. The stairs led down into a tall galleried room with a rug spread out over flagstones and a fireplace big enough to park a car in. A long polished wooden table had been laid for three. Alan Blunt and a dark, rather masculine woman unwrapping a sweet were already sitting down. "Mrs. Blunt?" "Alex," Blunt smiled briefly, as if something he didn't enjoy doing. "It's good of you to join us." Alex sat down. "You didn't give me a lot of choice." "Yes, I don't quite know what Crawley was thinking of, shooting you like that, but I suppose it was the easiest way. May I introduce my colleague, Mrs. Jones?" The woman nodded at Alex. Her eyes seemed to examine him minutely, but she said nothing. "Who are you?" Alex asked. "What do you want with me?" "I'm sure you have a great many questions, but first let's eat." Blunt must have pressed a hidden button, or else he was being overheard, for at that precise moment a door opened and a waiter in a white jacket and black trousers appeared, carrying 3 plates. "I hope you eat meat," Blunt continues. "Today is carré d'agneau." "You mean roast lamb?" "The chef is French." Alex waited until the food had been served. Blunt and Mrs. Jones drank red wine. He stuck to water. Finally, Blunt began. "As I am sure you've gathered," he said, "the Royal and General is not a bank. In fact, it doesn't exist. It's nothing more than a cover. And it follows, of course, that your uncle had nothing to do with banking. He worked for me. My name, as I told you at the funeral, is Blunt. I am Chief Executive of the Special Operations Division of MI6, and your uncle was, for want of a better word, a spy." Alex couldn't help smiling. "You mean like James Bond?" "Similar, although we don't go in for numbers. 00 and all the rest of it. He was a field agent, highly trained and very courageous. He successfully completed assignments in Iran, Washington, Hong Kong and Cairo, to name a few. I imagine this must come as a bit of a shock to you." Alex thought about the dead man, what he had known of him, his privacy, his long absences abroad, and the times he had come home injured, a bandaged arm one time, a bruised face another. Little accidents, Alex had been told, but now it all made sense. I'm not shocked, he said. Blunt cut a neat slice of meat. Ian Ryder's luck ran out on his last mission, he went on. He had been working undercover here in England, in Cornwall, and he was driving back to London to make a report when he was killed. You saw his car at the yard. Stryker and Son, Alex muttered. Who are they? Just people we use. We have budget restraints. We have to contract some of our work out. Mrs. Jones here is our head of special operations. She gave your uncle his last assignment. We're very sorry to have lost him, Alex. The woman spoke for the first time. She didn't sound very sorry at all. Do you know who killed him? Yes. Are you going to tell me? Not now. Why not? Because you don't need to know, not at this stage. All right. Alex put down his knife and fork. He actually hadn't eaten anything. My uncle was a spy. Thanks to you, he's dead. I found out too much, so you knocked me out and brought me here. Why am I here, by the way? This is one of our training centres, Mrs. Jones said. You've brought me here because you don't want me to tell anyone what I know. Is that what this is all about? Because if it is, I'll sign the Official Secrets Act or whatever it is you want me to do. But then I'd like to go home. This is all crazy anyway, and I've had enough. I'm out of here. Blunt coughed quietly. It's not quite as easy as that, he said. Why not? It's certainly true that you did draw attention to yourself both at the breaker's yard and then at our offices on Liverpool Street. And it's also true that you know, and what I'm about to tell you must go no further. But the fact of the matter is, Alex, we need your help. My help? Yes, he paused. Have you heard of a man called Herod Sale? Alex thought for a moment. I've seen his name in the newspaper. He's something to do with computers, and he owns racehorses. Doesn't he come from somewhere in Egypt? No, from Lebanon. Blunt took a sip of the wine. Let me tell you his story, Alex. I'm sure you'll find it of interest. Herod Sale was born in complete poverty in the back streets of Beirut. His father was a failed hairdresser. His mother took him washing. He had 9 brothers and 4 sisters, all living in 3 small rooms along with the family goat. Young Herod never went to school, and he should have ended up unemployed, unable to read or write like the rest of his family. But when he was 7, something occurred that changed his life. He was walking down Olive Street in the middle of Beirut when he happened to see an upright piano fall out of the 14th-storey window. Apparently it was being moved and it somehow overturned. Anyway, there were a couple of American tourists walking along the pavement below, and they would have both have been crushed, no doubt about it, except that at the last minute Herod threw himself at them and pushed them out of the way. The piano missed them by a millimetre. Of course they were enormously grateful to the young waif, and it now turned out that they were very rich. They made enquiries about him and discovered how poor he was. The very clothes he was wearing had been passed down by all 9 of his brothers, and so out of gratitude they more or less adopted him. Flew him out of Beirut and put him in school over here, where he made astonishing progress. He got 9 O-levels, and here's an amazing coincidence. At the age of 15, he actually found himself sitting next to a boy who would grow up to become Prime Minister of Great Britain. Our present Prime Minister, in fact. The 2 of them were at school together. I'll move quickly forward. After school, Sale went to Cambridge, where he got a first in economics. He then set out on a career that went from success to success. His own radio station, record label, computer software, and yes, he even found time to buy a string of racehorses, although for some reason they always seemed to come last. But what drew him to our attention was his most recent invention, a quite revolutionary computer which he calls the Stormbreaker. Stormbreaker. Alex remembered the file he had found in Ian Ryder's office. Things were beginning to come together. The Stormbreaker is being manufactured by Sale Enterprises, Mrs. Jones said. There's been a lot of talk about the design. It has a black keyboard and black casing, with a lightning bolt going down the side. Alex said he had seen a picture of it online. It doesn't only look different, Blunt cut in. It's based on completely new technology. It uses something called the round processor. I don't suppose that will mean anything to you. It's an integrated circuit on the sphere of silicon about 1 millimetre in diameter, Alex said. It's 90% cheaper to produce than an ordinary chip because the whole thing is sealed in, so you don't need clean rooms for production. Oh yes, Blunt coughed. Well, the point is, later today, Sale Enterprises are going to make quite a remarkable announcement. They are planning to give away tens of thousands of these computers. In fact, it is their intention to ensure that every secondary school in Britain gets its own Stormbreaker. It's an unparalleled act of generosity, Sale's way of thanking the country that gave him a home. So the man's a hero. So it would seem. He wrote to Downing Street a few months ago. Dear Prime Minister, you may remember me from our school days together. For almost 40 years I have lived in England, and I wish to make a gesture, something that will never be forgotten, to express my true feelings towards your country. The letter went on to describe the gift and was signed yours humbly by the man himself. Of course, the whole government was cock-a-hoop. The computers are being assembled at the Sale plant down in Port Talon, Cornwall. They'll be shipped across the country at the end of this month, and on April 1st there's to be a special ceremony at the Science Museum in London. The Prime Minister is going to press a button that will bring the computers online, the whole lot of them. And this is top secret, by the way. Mr. Sale is to be rewarded with British citizenship, which is apparently something he has always wanted. Well, I'm very happy for him, Alex said, but you still haven't told me what this is to do with me. Blunt glanced at Mrs. Jones, who had finished her meal while he was talking. She was unwrapping another peppermint and took over. For some time now, our department, Special Operations, has been concerned about Mr. Sale. The fact of the matter is, we've been wondering if he's too good to be true. I won't go into all the details, Alex, but we've been looking at his business dealings, his contacts in China and the former Soviet Union, countries that have never been our friends. The government may think he's a saint, but there's a ruthless side to him too. The security arrangements down at Port Talon worry us. He's more or less got his own private army. He's acting as if he's got something to hide. Not that anyone will listen, Blunt muttered. Exactly, the government's too clean to get their hands on the computers to listen to us. That's why we decided to send our own man down to the plant, supposedly to check on security, but in fact his job was to keep an eye on Herod Sale. You're talking about my uncle, Alex said. Ian Ryder had told him that he was going to an insurance convention, another lie in a life that had been nothing but lies. Yes, he was there for 3 weeks, and like us he didn't exactly take to Mr. Sale. In his first reports he described him as short-tempered and unpleasant, but at the same time he had to admit that everything seemed to be fine. Production was on schedule, the Stormbreakers were coming off the line, and everyone seemed to be happy. But then we got a message. Ryder couldn't say very much because it was an open line, but he told us that something had happened. He said he'd discovered something, that the Stormbreakers mustn't leave the plant, and that he was coming up to London at once. He left Port Talon at 4 o'clock. He never even got to the motorway. He was ambushed in a quiet country lane. The local police found the car. We arranged for it to be brought up here. Alex sat in silence. He could imagine it. A twisted lane with trees just in blossom, the silver BMW gleaming as it raced past, and round a corner a second car waiting. Why are you telling me all this? He asked. It proves what we were saying, Blunt replied. We have our doubts about Sale, so we are sending a man down. Our best friend, our best man. He found out something and ends up dead. Maybe Ryder discovered the truth. But I don't understand, Alex interrupted. Sale is giving away the computers. He's not making any money out of them. In return, he's getting British citizenship. Fine. What's he got to hide? We don't know, Blunt said. We just don't know, but we want to find out, and soon, before these computers leave the plant. They're being shipped out on the 31st of March, Mrs. Jones added. Only about 2 weeks from now. She glanced at Blunt. He nodded. That's why it's essential for us to send someone else to Port Talon. Someone to continue where your uncle left off. Alex smiled queasily. I hope you're not looking at me. We can't just send in another agent, Mrs. Jones said. The enemy has shown his hand. He's killed Ryder. He'll be expecting a replacement. Somehow we have to trick him. We have to send in someone who won't be noticed, Blunt continued. Someone who can look around and report back without being seen themselves. We are considering sending down a woman. She might be able to slip in as a secretary or receptionist. But then I had a better idea. A few months ago, one of the computer magazines ran a competition. Be the first boy or girl to use a stormbreaker. Travel to Port Talon and meet Herod Sale himself. That was the first prize, and it was won by some young chap who's apparently a bit of a whiz kid when it comes to computers. Name of Felix Lester. 14 years old, the same age as you. He looks a bit like you too. He's expected down at Port Talon less than 2 weeks from now. Wait a minute. You've already shown yourself to be an extraordinarily brave and resourceful, Blunt said. First of all at the breaker's yard. That was a karate kick, wasn't it? How long have you been learning karate? Alex didn't answer, so he went on. And then there was that little test we arranged for you at the bank. And any boy who would climb out of a 15th floor window just to satisfy his own curiosity has to be rather special. And it seems to me that you are very special indeed. What we're suggesting is that you come and work for us, Mrs. Jones said. We have enough time to give you some basic training, not that you'll need it probably, and we can equip you with a few items that you may need to help you with what we have in mind. Then we'll arrange for you to take the place of this other boy. You'll go to Sale Enterprises on the 29th of March. That's when this Lester boy is expected. You'll stay there until the 1st of April, which is the day of the ceremony. The timing couldn't be better. You'll be able to meet Herod Sale, keep an eye on him and tell us what you think. Perhaps you'll also find out what it was your uncle discovered and why he had to die. You shouldn't be in any danger. After all, who would suspect a 14-year-old boy of being a spy? All we're asking you to do is report back to us, Blunt said. That's all we want. 2 weeks of your time. A chance to make sure these computers are everything they're cracked up to be. A chance to save your country. Blunt had finished his dinner. His plate was completely clean, as if there had never been any food on it at all. He put down his knife and fork, laying them precisely side by side. All right, Alex, he said. So what do you say? There was a long pause. Blunt was watching him with polite interest. Mrs. Jones was unwrapping yet another peppermint, her black eyes seemingly fixed on the twist of paper in her hands. No, Alex said. I'm sorry. It's a dumb idea. I don't want to be a spy. I want to be a footballer. Anyway, I have a life of my own. He found it difficult to choose the right words. The whole thing was so preposterous he almost wanted to laugh. Why don't you ask this Felix Lester to snoop around for you? We don't believe he'd be as resourceful as you, Blunt said. He's probably better at computer games. Alex shook his head. I'm sorry. I'm just not interested. I don't want to get involved. That's a pity, Blunt said. His tone of voice hadn't changed, but there was a heavy, dead quality to the words. And there was something different, too, about him. Throughout the meal he'd been polite, not friendly, but at least human. In an instant that had disappeared. Alex thought of a toilet chain being pulled. The human part of him had just been flushed away. Then we'd better move on to discuss your future, he continued. Like it or not, Alex, the Royal General is now your legal guardian. I thought you said the Royal General didn't exist. Blunt ignored him. Ian Ryder has of course left the house and all his money to you. However, he left it in trust until you are 21. And we control that trust. So there will, I'm afraid, have to be some changes. The American girl who lives with you, Jack, Miss Starbright, her visa has expired. She'll be returned to America. We propose to put the house on the market. Unfortunately, you have no relatives to look after you, so I'm afraid that also means you'll have to leave Brooklyn. You'll be sent to an institution. There's one I know just outside Birmingham. St. Elizabeth in Sowerbridge. Not a very pleasant place, but I'm afraid there's no alternative." "You're blackmailing me," Alex exclaimed. "Not at all. But if I agree, what do you ask?" Blunt glanced at Mrs. Jones. "Help us and we'll help you," she said. Alex considered, but not for very long. He had no choice and he knew it. Not when these people controlled his money, his present life, his entire future. "You talked about training," he said. Mrs. Jones nodded. "That's why we brought you here, Alex. This is a training centre. If you agree to what we want, we can start at once." "Start at once?" Alex spoke the 3 words without liking the sound of them. Blunt and Mrs. Jones were waiting for his answer. He sighed. "Yeah, all right, it doesn't look like I've got very much choice." He glanced at the slices of cold lamb on his plate. Dead meat. Suddenly he knew how it felt.